Hi, this is Brandy Shantz, and you're listening to Living Chronic. Today I'm speaking with Rosalind Joffe. She is the chronic illness career coach. Really excited to have you here today, Rosalind. I wish I knew you 10 years ago when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. So, welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Brandy.
So, how long have you been doing this?
This
This
particular focus of
particular
work,
Yes.
I'd say it's now 2 decades. That I really shifted it in this focus, a little over 10 years. Yeah, at least.
You have a chronic illness yourself, correct?
I'm sorry, when I said a little over 10 years, I meant a little over 20 years. I
Years.
have numerous chronic illnesses. Yes.
Mhm.
I've been living with this it's 45 years now.
Oh, wow. So
43 years since a diagnosis.
Wow, so you really have a lot of wisdom to share for certain. I feel like I've learned a lot in 10 years, so I can only imagine, what you've learned about being chronically ill and just navigating life, your career, and, being a regular person.
Yes, being, I call it the notion of being normal, what
Yes.
that means to us, what it looks like in the world. Yeah, I don't know about wisdom. When you said that, the funny thing is, when I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, which was the first autoimmune, and I have several, the neurologist said to me, and it's something that I used to quote when I was speaking, that he said, you're going to learn something when you're quite young, and you're lucky to be learning this. You're going to learn how to smell the roses.
Oh,
And my husband and I used to laugh and say, boy, I wish we did not have that sense of smell. I would have given that up happily. And yet, what I would say, and I talk about with people I work with, is and friends, it's everything in life is a learning opportunity if you let it be. It doesn't mean you asked for it, but there's always the opportunity to grow.
that's a really great perspective. I think sometimes it's very easy to get down when you have these difficult things happening to
Mm,
you. And it's very easy
yeah,
to say, well, this isn't fair. Why is this happening to me? But to look at it as a learning opportunity is a really great positive spin on something that, quite frankly, is not positive at all.
even as you say that, I want to chime in and say, no, 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 no. It's not about positive thinking, so to speak, because I think there's been so much made of that. Um, so yes, it's positive, but I would say it's life affirming.
Mhm.
And we're told when we live with chronic illness, I mean, we are told by everyone around us how important it is to have the right attitude, to stay, positive, have hope. And I found that was just the worst to be told.
Yes.
So it's, it's much more just trying to find those muscles inside of you that you've already got and that you've used other places on this really, really lonely, hard experience.
And it certainly is difficult. I've learned just in these past 10 years that you're right. Yeah, everybody says, well, just make it a positive thing. And the only thing I ever really heard about chronic illness was, well, this person had something terrible happen to them, and then they wrote a book. They won the Olympics.
Right.
And well, what happened in between? Why do I feel like such a failure? Because right now I'm just trying to figure out a way to put one foot in front of the other
Right.
and keep living. It's
Yeah.
difficult. I don't think we talk about that enough.
No, we don't, which is why I'm glad we started with the notion of the positive, because it's in some ways debunking that myth is, I would say, been a cause of mine forever. And that when I talk about looking for the opportunity, it's hard.
Hmm.
I would always say that I felt really lucky that I had a big denial chip. That helped me stop, it helped me until there was a point when it no longer existed. Um, when I fell one too many times and broke too many bones, but
Mhm.
we bring to this who we are,
Yeah.
and we're all a little broken in some places, no matter what.
Yes.
Unless you start this from childhood, and even then you start off with this experience. So we can't minimize how hard it is. And while also then just trying to find the places where we can get the support.
And that's what's most important. I think when I look back, I always talk about what do you wish you knew when you were first diagnosed, which is just, I mean, I'm confident I'm going to put together a book one day from everything I've learned from every great podcast guest, from everything I've learned just in my own everyday life. And, it's difficult. And I sat in denial for a while. I just couldn't
Mm,
even believe what just happened to me.
yeah.
I'm fine, nothing to see here, don't worry about me. And it took me a while to reach out and find my people and say, you know what, I'm not okay and
Mm,
I need help. And that's when I really truly started coming to terms with my new life as it is, when I was able to reach out and ask for help. And that's one of the reasons I found you and I thought, "Oh my goodness, if only I had known you 10 years ago." Because I had a situation which is probably not unlike what many people experience. I suddenly started having very severe symptoms of Crohn's. I was diagnosed with Crohn's. Once, it takes a while to get the diagnosis. You have some symptoms, but you're moving about life. You're finding a way to
mm,
negotiate things, around this, and then it just gets bad and there's no ignoring it. And I
mm,
worked in a classified job, so there was no work from home. And you know what? Let's be honest, we weren't talking about work from home back then. I have one friend that was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis during the pandemic. And I remember one of the first things I said to her was, "Well, aren't you lucky?" And she
yeah,
said, "Yes, I am," because we were already working from home. We were all about flexibility. So when I told my boss I was going to have to take some time to deal with my health and I'd be right back doing work at 9 p.m., nobody questioned.
right.
So I was very lost. I didn't know what to do. And believe it or not, the only advice given to me by my doctor was, well, why don't you just apply for disability? And I
Yeah.
still don't know what kind of advice that is. Because not only do we have to work for money, but we discussed before when we spoke, it's very important for your mental health to have something to do. Don't
Hmm.
sit at home thinking about how terrible my life is because I'm sick, please. And
Hmm.
that's a lot of what your business is about, helping people to find that new career if necessary, right?
Well, yes, that's a piece of what I've done. Though, as I said, I've really cut back on my client number of clients at this point. Though, at the same time, I would say my own thinking on so much of this evolves.
Mhm.
Like you, actually not like you. Well, like you, I had symptoms for 2 years that I didn't recognize that were MS symptoms. And then when I became fully, literally disabled, I couldn't get out of bed. It became clear. But as with all chronic illness, it waxed and waned.
Mhm.
When I developed ulcerative colitis, they thought it was Crohn's. So I was diagnosed with that. They are two symptoms for a number of years, didn't have a clue. And each of the times I changed the jobs I was doing to try, I called it, I was on this sort of windy road. I
Mhm.
would do these really hairpin turns to try to figure out how to keep working. I was lucky. And I always knew I was lucky, not just because I had this denial chip, but I had the financial resources.
Yes.
And I was very aware of that. I'd always been very aware of how fortunate I was that way. I was married and didn't have to earn a living. It meant it, but it was a huge downshift for us financially, but we could do it.
Mhm.
That said, like you, I realized, and I had two children, that I needed something else. I had to be more than just this illness. But that's not easy.
No.
And this was 19, by the time I had had surgery and could actually function in the world, I had my colon taken out. It was the early 90s. Internet was just starting. I was still trying to work out in the world.
Mhm.
And when I finally, in early 2000s, discovered that what I wanted to do, I had been coaching executives, what I wanted to do was work with people like me.
Mhm.
I realized I could do it completely online. And that was a gift. But once again, I was lucky my skills transferred to that. I was lucky that I could financially take the hit when I needed to. And so there is no one size fits all for this in any way. And I too, by the way, I went on SSDI
Mhm.
and I did it because did we absolutely need the money? No, but I did it for my self-esteem. And
Right?
that's not a great reason to have done it. And I stopped at a certain point realizing I don't need this money, but there's a lot that goes on around self-esteem. And I work on that with people primarily rather than what's the best career. But how do you do this and maintain a sense of your autonomy and what is really the best for you, what you can handle?
That's a really great, question to ask because I think the self-esteem really does take a hit.
Oh yeah.
One day you're this independent, autonomous person in control of your entire life, and then the next day you're wholly dependent upon a medical system that works, a medication that will help you get into remission, people who will understand what you're going through and be gracious enough to give you the space to be the person you once were, but also a sick person. And I think that's a very important question to ask people. What
And it's a very different kind of question that we ask for the people who we're really close with.
Mhm,
And then the next tier out, but it's still a personal relationship. And then there is the relationship you have in the world, whether it's working, whatever that is, because you still, unless you're in a wheelchair
mhm,
or have some illness which physically has damaged the way you look or altered the way you look,
mhm.
people can't tell. And even if you're in that wheelchair or have some kind of a mark on your body that shows, they still don't know what you can and can't do,
That's true.
or how you're feeling that day, or how your brain is working. And that's why it's so, you really have to go back to the fundamentals, the foundation of who you are,
Mhm,
and build on it and keep building on it. And that's life in general. As I always said to my kids, and my thing was to normalize all of this.
mhm.
We all do this all the time. I mean, I'm now 72. Where I'm in a whole different developmental stage in life. Yet, and there's an intersection more than ever between illness and aging and the age I am, but there's still a very specific thing that happens when you have debilitating, when you're living with debilitating health,
Mhm.
whether it's mental, emotional, or physical.
Oh, you're right. It's life altering. I found for me personally, I try not to tell too many people if I'm not feeling well because,
Mm,
well, first of all, I feel like I'm just handing over my pain to them. And generally speaking, when somebody says, "How are you today?" they just want to hear fine, and everybody moves on. They don't
right.
want you to transfer what you're actually feeling over to them. But also, I feel that sometimes people take too much pity on me. They don't give
Mm,
me enough. Oh, you know what? Brandy probably shouldn't work right now. Let's not send her any business because she's not feeling well. Or, oh, let's lighten the load on Brandy today. She's going through a flare. And, while sometimes I do have to say, it's time, I have to say it to myself. That's the first person that's my biggest issue every day. I have to say to myself sometimes, you know what, Brandy, today you're going to lay down, you're going to sleep some more, you're going to rest, you're going to let
Mhm.
your body get better. But most of the time, what I want to do is push myself because I don't want to just be the sick person sitting at home. And it's very difficult to explain that to healthy people because they just hear sick and they think, well, you need a break. That's
Right,
every day. I
right,
need to push many days,
right,
and I don't
right.
want you to take everything away from me because it's important. It may be difficult, it may be a little painful to get up and open up my laptop and get that work done, but at the end of the day, I feel so much better about myself. Because yes, I'm a Crohn's patient. Yes, I've been dealing with drug-induced lupus and MS, but you know what? I also did my job, and it's important. That's part of the
Mm,
I think.
mm. And I think that you said something in there that's really critical and that I now, 45 years later, still struggle with. And that is that we can't expect other people to know what our experience is. And that's true no matter what that is. And we can't expect people to say the quote, the right thing, especially when we don't know what it is we want to hear.
Yeah.
One moment I might want my husband to say to me, you know what? We shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do this. Rest. Another moment, I don't want anyone taking my autonomy away.
Yeah.
And it's the same and even harder at work. And I have clients who said they just stopped working because they got so tired of dealing with the communication.
Yes.
And I understand that. And people who say, I just don't see my friends anymore because I'm tired of trying to talk about it, the guilt, the feeling alone. I'd just rather be alone.
There is a sense of guilt, I think, as well, when you're interacting with other people because you're not yourself, you're not feeling well. Um, there's a mental health component no matter what you're going through. And it's very difficult to interact with people and not feel like you're bringing them into what you're going through. And
Mm,
I think there's a guilt associated with that. I feel it for my husband frequently. I, like you, am very fortunate, and I recognize that I'm married, and my husband's very supportive. He has
mm,
been there for me through all of this. There's been difficult times, but he's always been there for me. And I also have the very fortunate position of not having to work. I don't,
right,
live the life I love as much, but I don't have to work. And that
right.
puts me in a really wonderful position as a sick person, if you could
Mhm,
position as a sick person, right? But I feel the guilt for him all the time because when we
mhm,
married, he married a young, very healthy woman who was
right.
very strong and independent. I was an army officer at the time,
Mm,
and I, had zero problems. And he actually had to really confront that sickness and health portion of
mm,
the vows.
mm.
And I don't think many of us ever think about that when we say it. You know?
No, not at, they say in sickness, exactly. It says in sickness and health, but we have no ideas when you're young. If you were at 72 when you do those vows, I have friends who've said you do know what it means.
Oh, yes.
But that's why also, I mean, autoimmune diseases primarily hit women
Yeah.
in their prime time of life when, developing career, personal relationships, family. This is the time when you can, you're most able to have babies and it shifts
Mhm.
the world that you thought you would be in. And especially if you thought that you were going to be somebody who did it all, had that career, had all the things that you thought everyone would have, whatever that meant to you. I think it's interesting that when you first mentioned the pandemic and a friend who was diagnosed, and I just remember writing, I stopped writing my blog, not blog, toward the end, I was just tired of writing. But one thing I wrote about frequently was that this was not new for people working at home, being used to being alone,
Yes.
communicating on Zoom. This was something I knew a lot about, as did all of my clients, and wished for.
Mhm.
But with it also comes other burdens, and nothing is as simple as we think it's going to be. There are definitely um, trade-offs that we make. I guess that's the best word. I'm not sure that's the word I would want to use, but I call it the pros and cons. You know, there's the things we absolutely need, and then there's the things we want to have.
Yes. You
How
know
have you found working at home? How have you found that to be for you?
you know, for me, I appreciate being able to work from home because it allows me to continue doing something productive and meaningful despite
Mm,
illness. But, I also miss some of the stress, and I always say to people, everybody looks at stress as a negative, but
yeah.
sometimes stress is a positive and great things come out of stress.
Mm,
And I miss, my old schedule. I do. I
yeah.
waking up at 4:30 and going for a run. I miss running into the office and being there early. I miss seeing people each and every day.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
there's just a loss there, I think.
Yes.
I still try to get out as much as I can. If I'm feeling well,
Mm,
I'm out of the house, and thank goodness. I mean, I think we all had the same experience, right? Being a chronically ill person in the middle of a pandemic. Oh my goodness, and the
right.
person I felt worse, it wasn't happy for any of us, but I felt terrible for my poor husband who just lived every day in fear he was going to bring home something to kill me.
Right. Right.
So when I got that vaccine, I said, I have to get out of here. I am out
Mm,
of the house.
mm,
I missed being around people. There's a
mm.
loss there when you can't see and touch and speak.
Yeah. And so too, it there's the loss, and yet there is, I found it was freedom more than ever, because a lot of the work that I do outside of my professional work requires being in the world and going places. I do a lot of social justice kinds of work, which means being there
Yes.
always. And I didn't think about it when I first started going in that direction, but I was up against that thing again, that I'm that person you can't rely on to be there.
Yeah.
And that's never easy. And I found the pandemic such a relief. I no longer had to ever think about it in those ways. And since, I just want to go back to this notion that since the topic, which is about work and how we navigate that. When I first wrote my book, or was it my first blog? I don't even remember. But my theme, and it still is, that my statement to this is, you only do a job that you believe you can do as it is stated,
Yes.
if you have the choice.
Hmm.
But the thing about that choice piece is that even if you think you don't have the choice, most likely you're not going to end up staying in that job. Either they're going to move you out, or you're going to move you out. And it's a hard lesson to learn.
Hmm.
And that, I think, and it's a hard lesson to learn, but it's also hard to know ahead of time.
It is. And I think most of us try so hard to get that full picture of what we're about to go into. I deal with a lot of anxiety because I never want to not be to accept something and not be able to do it correctly. It's a big source of anxiety. And, I've had a lot of conversations about this recently about, we think in terms of equity, whether you're out there doing work, social justice. I've been in business development for most of my career of some form, stakeholder engagement.
Mhm.
I'm engaging other countries in my former career.
Mm.
We're out talking to, you know, um, the head of a division about a new book of business. What's lost if I can't get out of the house is that overhearing people. That's the ability to observe just
Absolutely.
people not putting forward something on a computer, people just
Mhm.
working, living their lives, being able to see what that means and how that affects what I'm about to do or what I might be able to offer. I might not know um, that particular division could really use this kind of specific business, but if I can overhear it, then I do. So I
Or
think there
see it yourself, experience it.
Yes. So there's a bit of an equity loss there. I like to do my best to try to get out when I can. If I can get out of the house, I want
Mhm.
to. But I've talked to a lot of people about that. How do equity is very difficult.
Right,
How do you make up for that if you're the one always on Zoom?
right. And if you have a supervisor or a boss, what does that person do with this information? And in the end, you know, I still have a few clients back when I was coaching leaders and just one or two. And it doesn't matter whether a person is well or not. Managing people and supervising people has lots of challenges, and being the person managed and supervised when you have to answer to someone else, it's complicated.
Hmm.
When you have to answer to just yourself, there is less complication in that you're not also dealing with this other piece. But it's still, if you have expectations for yourself and you want this business or whatever to get to a certain place, it doesn't matter what the reason is. It's easy to criticize yourself, to feel less than. And it is a constant challenge because there is always this external factor. And everyone has external factors, 6 children, 6 parents, their house had a fire that day, whatever. There's all kinds of things. Friend is in deep trouble, but this is all the time for us.
Hmm.
We never know for sure. And so there is this way in which we just have to set up the cards so that they're in our favor and then try our best to keep it in mind, to say, okay, maybe this is working, maybe this isn't working, and shuffle. That's not to say everyone has that capacity, you
And it's
know?
difficult to
Yeah.
assess your life and how you can rearrange it. I myself am looking for another career change. Here I am again. But I've found myself, people always have questions to ask about, what is it like? So you're, you know, disabled, you have a chronic illness. What is this? And I always say, well, what it means is I am very adaptable to change.
Mm-hmm.
I know how to pivot. We had to change careers when I could not get out of the house from Crohn's. My goodness,
Mm-hmm.
the pandemic hit. I had a very, face forward job. And I had to figure out how to do that without being allowed to get around people
Right.
because I was very susceptible to this virus that, had locked us
Yeah.
all at home. So I had to come up with new ideas. I had to
Right.
pivot because, at first the business, you know, we weren't, selling the way we were pre-pandemic. So I had to
Right.
pivot that. And then I had pivoted again because everybody changed. So
Yeah.
I'm always, ready for change, but I think that is difficult. Not everybody, even in the worst of circumstances, necessarily has that toolkit to know, okay, here's what I can do. Let me
Right.
change this, shuffle
Right.
this
And
direction.
even if they have the toolkit, they don't always have the opportunity. There are too many other factors that are going on in their lives that they just, they don't have, the world is not going to let them.
No, you're
And
right. The first thing I
that,
always say to people, because everybody says, "Oh, you're so strong, you're so smart, you're so all these things." And I say, "Yeah, but I have a lot of ability to do that because I have a financial ability. I have
right,
um, free healthcare through the VA
right,
hospital and through my husband.
right.
So, you know, that really does provide a lot of opportunity for me to do things like start a business that somebody else may not have the ability to do." This has been really wonderful. Rosalind, thank you so much for coming on today. I've really enjoyed this.
It's my pleasure, Brandy. I've enjoyed speaking with you. And good luck to you as you figure out this next transition, whatever it is.
Thank you. I
I
appreciate
think you're
it.
going to do fine. You've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and that's learning those are the strength.
Yes, it
Good.
definitely is. It's a great point to end on. Thank
All
you
right.
again, Rosalind. Thank you,
Uh,
everyone, for listening. This has been Living Chronic.